The following podcast may be explicit. One Joe Young presents Adventures from the Shed, a tabletop RPG podcast. You can find us online at adventuresfromtheshed.com. Settle into your chair in the shed as Chris, Kelly, Bridget, and Joe have a casual conversation on gaming and learning the ropes in a new group. We hope the thoughts we share in our discussion help avoid awkward situations. Enjoy the podcast.
Hi, and welcome to The Shed for Adventures from the Shed. You can find us online at adventuresfromtheshed.com. Look us up on iTunes and on Facebook. We would like to see you there in either place. If you find us on iTunes, go ahead and give us a rating there because we'd love to hear from you. We are here today. We're going to have a special sidebar episode today where we're going to talk to our newest players about how the game's going so far. Speaking of newest players, we're going to go around the table starting with this person right here and say hi.
Hi, my name is Kelly.
There you go.
I play Trillium, the druid.
Druid.
And I am new here.
She's pretty new here. Who else is over here?
This is Chris. I'm not so new here. I've been here, what like 2 years now?
I'm not sure. It's been
like
a little while, hasn't it?
2 year-ish, maybe. I don't know. Double digits. Not really.
I mean, you guest starred several times, or
Yes,
at least once
but,
before, yeah. And then, last but not least, we have...
Hi, I'm Bridget. I've been gaming for 1 month now.
And loving it.
And I am Joe. I am here as I have been, I guess, from the beginning. I guess
Show
I'm the
off.
least new. So what we're going to do today, we're going to take some time to talk with our new players. One of the things we've done in the past here on Adventures from the Shed, in previous sidebars as well as during gameplay, is we try to give some advice on how to run the game, how to run the table, how to interact with the other humans that happen to be sitting around the table with you while you're playing these role-playing games. And today we're going to take some of that to heart, and we will talk amongst ourselves about how things are going, how the game's been working, and things that we may want to change, improve, things that are going too well, maybe. All right, maybe not. So part of what I'd like to do is put, of course, Kelly and Bridget on the spot right away and say, how is it going? Whoever wants to go first, you can. But think of what we've done so far from the beginning of, do you guys want to play in the group? Right up to character creation to, hey, we're actually in this world now, and how's it going? Kelly will yawn.
Sorry.
I'm happy playing Dungeon World, so I'm glad we're doing that. I do think the character creation is fairly straightforward and simple, and I appreciate that as being someone who does not like to have to do a whole lot of math during the game. Like you said, it's more
good at math.
It's more story based, which I like.
Yep.
The hard part is writing the story as you're playing.
Yep. Yeah.
So when you say the character creation is simpler, what do you mean? From your perspective, what does simpler mean?
Well, you are given numbers and decide what you want instead of having to roll a character and come up with those numbers. The starter, the sheets that they give you to start with explain a lot as you go.
And of course, if we're going to talk about the game system, which of course we are, I will fanboy Dungeon World again because that's me. And just to let the listeners know, that is the system we're talking about today, at least when we're talking about the game we're playing and the characters we have. It is the Dungeon World game system. Mm-hmm. What else?
It's been a combination of fun and awkward.
Fawkward.
Well, that wasn't my word, but okay. Where it's fun when we get rolling on something where we have a focused thing we need to do.
Yeah.
But then it gets awkward after we're like, okay, we did the thing.
Now what
now
do we do?
What?
Yeah, I agree. And sometimes it's kind of like a hesitant takeoff.
Yeah.
You know, we're kind of like... Mm-hmm. I don't know. At least the first, couple sessions.
Yeah, the first two were a little
I think
awkward.
we were all kind of just trying to get to know where we all stand and who we all are and how do we know each other and, all that.
So hit me with what you think was one of the early awkward moments.
Just the start of the game. Just the initial, that very first session was... you're trying to figure out, well, who is my character? And then you're given a story, and you're like, well, I don't really know who my character is and what she would say. And, you're being asked, well, where does your character come from? Well, I don't know.
Hell, and then, making this up.
Like, I always found that, like, after the gameplay, then I started coming up with all these ideas, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah, the same thing happened to me. We had after the last session, we had a long conversation in the car, and I was like, "Oh man, I should have done this, and I should have done that, and what if I do this next time?" And he's like, "You should have come up with that during the game." And I was like, "Yeah, but I didn't know."
Yeah.
But yes, next time is fine too.
Yeah. And I don't remember half of it now. So
right, exactly.
It's been a month.
Yeah, it has been almost a month since the last time we recorded. Yeah.
But I agree with Bridget about the storytelling as well. Like, I've never played D&D. My husband plays D&D a lot, or used to play D&D a lot.
Not anymore.
And compared to Dungeon World, it seems like D&D has a lot. It's more rule heavy, more math.
A lot more.
Dungeon World it's fun because everybody kind of works together to build this story, and there's lulls.
Yeah.
But you still you're all helping and contributing to this story, and that's fun.
So, Chris, what do you think about awkward beginnings? How do you think that we started this? And is there anything you can think of, especially probably talking with Kelly about it? Anything that you think we could have done differently?
I didn't think it was as awkward as maybe because it's a new thing for them. For me, it wasn't as awkward, but I think Dungeon World, and depending how you play it, if you're really building your character, like building that story from scratch, everybody, then it's a little bit harder to do, unless you already have something in mind of how your character is, like a little pre-gaming setup for at least your character, and then it's a little bit easier. But there's always going to be that, especially if it's these characters do not know each other kind of thing. Then you're going to have that little awkwardness of like forcing the group to get on the same page for the adventure.
Yeah. Well,
and that's actually one thing, a good point of what Chris just said. There are typically two schools of thought when you're starting a game. You come up with your entire character concept before day one, or, as we did, create everything on day one, which then, yes, it does put you in a little more of a time crunch if you're trying to think of everything you want to know about your character at that point. To Kelly's point, you really start thinking about, to me at least, you'll really start thinking about the things that make your character once you actually take some actions with that character. Once that character gets involved in a couple of things and you determine how they're going to react, that helps you then go back and say, well, if I have this really brave character, then maybe that whole story I was thinking of about them being from a circus family or something doesn't quite fit. Maybe they're more like a heroic beginnings or something like that. And that can make a difference. So we typically here, because I think it's more entertaining, we try to make it up on the spot. And I know sometimes that can be more of a struggle.
Well, and I think for me, what contributes to what we're calling the awkwardness is
awkwardness.
Oh, yeah, the awkwardness. Yeah. As like a new gamer, I'm often wondering, well, can I do that? Am I allowed to do that? And with Dungeon World, what we're playing now is there's really, you can do anything.
Yeah.
And so I've got to kind of get out of my head about, oh, am I allowed to do that? Because really there's not a rule that says I can't, so why am I saying can I? So I think getting over that hurdle, too, of, what I'm capable of doing or what my character is capable of doing, And
I guess sometimes I expect it to be like a starter set where there's a predetermined path that we're supposed to follow and looking to you and going, okay, what's next?
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't know, what's next?
Yeah.
What do you want to do?
You tell me.
You tell me. So, it's fun to be able to just say we're going left instead of right, but sometimes we're like, tell us where to go.
So what other expectations or worries did you guys have about coming into a group with people that have been playing for like probably 20, my time playing is probably 20, 30 years. And there might be breaks in between, but that's a lot of time in for gaming,
It is. before you started, you didn't know how awkward it might be,
Right.
but you probably had some nervousness or trepidation, or for that matter, even just excitement about.
Yeah. So what? What excitement or what? Like where are the expectations? Whether they're excited expectations or like, oh man, I'm worried about doing this.
Well, the new people thing, like Kelly and I hadn't met before.
And remember, it's a general rule that nobody likes their own voice when they hear it back, so you can't be worried about that.
Except me.
Now I feel self-conscious.
Except I'm the guy
Right.
that likes his voice. I like my voice better on recording.
That's why I say it's a general rule.
Especially since Mike thought I was a black guy. That's hilarious.
That's awesome.
Shout out to Mike.
Shout out.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Mike. Yeah, definitely for me was the fact I was going to be recorded, and and I felt like, gosh, I'm inexperienced. I'm being recorded. I'm going to be so boring because I'm not as creative as everybody else because they've been gaming, and I'm just going to be the boring character with the terrible voice. I feel like I sound like
As long as you don't sound like Lou Ferrigno or Mike Tyson, you're good.
I was
Right?
going to say, it's not a boring character.
my character. Actually, will say I've done better than I thought I would. So there's that. But initially, I hate the way my voice sounds on the phone or answering machine, things like that. And so I was like,
I get that.
that was a huge distraction at first. Just getting over that.
Now, I do some of the audio magic to make your voices more full. I don't know if you pay attention to that when you listen back to it.
That's nice.
Yeah, I tried that because, I want to make sure we have a good quality audio podcast.
Oh. So special.
Fancy.
But yeah, I think once we got over the initial awkwardness of new people,
Awkwardness.
I'm not saying that word.
I find it very fuckward that you won't say it.
Stop trying to make fuckward happen.
Hashtag fuckward. That's this.
Yes.
That's
Hashtag
this,
awkward.
that will be in the description
Right.
of this. I'm going to have to write that down.
But yeah, just getting over the initial nerves and differences and adjustments and new people and.
Did you feel like you weren't going to be as creative as the others because you didn't game in this realm before?
Yeah, it's kind of seems overwhelming to start with a blank canvas. Mm-hmm. Like where he and I were talking about how Dungeon World is, a black and white drawing and we color it in. We didn't even have the black and white drawing to start from. So I was kind of like, can we have some dots?
Yeah,
or
catch the
something
dots.
to make a
Paint by
dot to
numbers?
dot and paint by number. Can we have what color
least have a
paints we're
stick
going to
figure or
use?
something?
Or
Bridget
Right.
mentioned that earlier when her and I were talking, and I actually thought that was an interesting analogy where I normally use the coloring book, and it's just kind of, we have the wireframe in there, and she was saying that kind of the way that we're building it from scratch is more like a dot to dot. And then I thought, if it is, though, it's a random dot to dot.
yeah, I'm like, it's a
the
dot to
dots
dot.
keep
We don't
moving.
know what the dots are, which dots are supposed
And
to connect.
because of the group of people we typically get together, regardless of which direction we go, we always end up with a dot to dot in the shape of a penis. I'm not sure
that
why.
was his
And
creation.
now that was another thing. Like, when we first started, I was like, well, we are being recorded. So, like, what am I allowed to say? And
There's very little that you
is
cannot
there
say.
The following
is this supposed
podcast
to be a
may be
family
explicit.
friendly?
Yeah. He
like,
puts the disclaimer at the beginning.
Yeah.
yeah.
Everyone. So it's just stuff, really what it comes down to, and this is good advice for any table. You, as a group, will hit that moment where you say, all right, we crossed that line. And that's where you say, all right, now we know that line is there. And it turns out our line is really far out there.
You have
There's
more of
lot
a
stuff.
curve.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
kind of a wavy line.
And that's one thing to learn, and I think we're getting there with it.
But
with this group.
what threw me so much is that when Kurt threw out Harak and then was like, no,
Yeah.
don't
He didn't
say that, don't
realize.
do that, and we're like, oh no, we've gone there.
Yep.
And I mentioned Facebook. We had a comment from one of our fans on Facebook that he could imagine Harak is quite impressive.
Quite.
Yes.
So
Sure, we've
and
all
I
mentioned
think
it.
I don't think we were planning for it to take that turn, but I just think that was a really fun turn that we took.
Yeah. It definitely.
And now I'm like more comfortable with, if we're going to be talking about Harak all the time.
And we all
We have
contributed
to do
our
that,
jokes,
yeah.
Right. And that's another good thing to know, especially with new people at the table, the comfort level
Yeah.
of how far is too far, but not just that, is where can you sit in a nice comfortable zone. because there's no need to push it. Even though we have a line, there's no need to ride that line. We can just sit here comfortably making our immature, dumbass comments for hours a day. We can do that, and that's something that I think should be true of just about every gaming table. Find your comfort zone, not just where your limits are, but find a comfort zone and play within that zone.
Yeah.
And I like to think that we achieve that a vast majority of the time here.
Yeah, and just to throw out something positive instead of talking about how awkward everything's been. So, like, in the past, Bridget and I are female. And
I understand that.
So you say.
like, our listeners, I'm sure, can tell our voices. We are female. So, for me, like, I've gamed with it, and it's mostly primarily guys.
And they love it when a girl shows up.
And sometimes when you, as a female, you get into a situation, you're gaming with a bunch of guys, and, like, sometimes it can go to where the guys are just, like, they're telling you how to play,
yeah.
and, like, they kind of take over and say, well, you should do this.
That
Or,
term that I've heard
why don't
more
you do
recently,
this?
Mansplaining.
Mansplaining,
You
yes.
get mansplained.
And, like, that has not been the case with this group, and that's been awesome. Like, because even though I am, like, in the beginning I was nervous and hesitant, nobody jumped in and played my character for me, and that's huge, because then, I'm able to develop my character. I'm able to, think on my own about what I want to do. Even though it may be awkward or, slow going, but...
Well, and I think, too, Joe can kind of sense when we're
Floundering.
when we're stumped and say, well, what about this? And
Right,
he'll ask us an
right.
open-ended question, and it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Now I have an idea.
So, guys, listening, if you want female players, please do not mansplain.
Yeah. Quit
it is
treating
not
them
fun
like they're
for us.
new, no matter how new they are. Treat
Yeah.
them like somebody who should be at the table, and that I think, to me, that's a very big point. And for me, it's regardless of male or female. I want to treat the person as they're here to play that thing, and let
Right.
them play it, and encourage them to play it, because otherwise it just gets frustrating and awkward, or awkward.
Yeah, my thing is, like, whatever contributes to the fun level, just
Right.
keep that going.
So, yeah, guys, be patient. If a female is there to play, she's there to play. And if she's having trouble or, going slow or whatever, just be patient, Don't play her character for her.
Yeah, I'd like to think if the chick shows up at the table just to find out how cool I am, I'll get a different vibe, right?
Right.
It isn't that she just wants me to sit there explaining everything to her all the
Yeah.
time. I'm sure of that, yeah. So I think I can handle that. And I do think it can be tough for some guys to understand that just because I know everything that's on that sheet, it doesn't mean I have to tell it to you.
Right.
Because you can read too.
Exactly.
Right. It's kind of important that you do read and that you learn it, and then you have more freedom when you play that character.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, that's another thing about starting from scratch with a new game and new sheets. It's I think we're probably halfway through the second session, and I went, oh, there's another thing I hadn't
that
read all
too.
my things.
That
and I
happens
was
even
like,
with guys that have played for a long
Oh,
time,
gosh,
yeah, but it's just
I think we all kind of had that moment. Like,
Yeah,
even
like, oh,
Kurt
wait,
was like,
I
oh
could
my
do
gosh, my wolf could do
Oh, yeah.
this.
There's
And that
an
was
aha
just...
moment. Yeah.
Because you know your bread and butter moves, but then you're like, oh, wait a minute, there's a lot of the detail I forgot
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
That might only come up for specific scenarios, and you forget about it until
Yeah.
it happens. Yeah.
And because we just mentioned that stuff, let me throw out there another thing that I was thinking earlier when you were saying about what can I and can I not do. And specifically when it comes to Dungeon World, the only things that I would say to any character player, you should not be trying to do something that is a bread and butter move of another class.
Yeah.
So if you're the druid, then you should not be trying to do the called shot of the ranger. You should not be trying to set your hands on fire like the immolator. You should not be trying to heal people like the druid, or not like the cleric. Sorry.
right.
You shouldn't be casting spells because, well, just because you could say it, that doesn't necessarily mean you should try it, because that's the bread and butter of another class. But when it comes to, can I jump on top of the altar and do a flip and punch the guy in the face, the answer is yes, because nobody else does that as their bread and butter, their signature move.
But now, do you think as the cleric, it's, I don't know, breaking the cleric to take the wizard spell, the magic missile, or is that
no,
just...
because it's part of what the cleric can do anyway.
Okay.
Right? So casting a spell isn't unique to the cleric. The cleric spells are mostly unique to the cleric, although a wizard can pick up a cleric spell and a cleric can pick up a wizard spell.
Okay.
So there's some dabbling back and forth, but it's not like with the cleric you have, what is it? I'm looking at your sheet here quickly, a divine guidance. A wizard isn't going to have divine guidance, and a cleric isn't going to be able to do rituals like a wizard can. Those are the only, to me, hard and fast rules. You can't take over another class, mainly because you're going with yours. Now, those open-ended things within the world, they are free to anybody. You just think, is it reasonable? Come up with a reasonable standard. Is it reasonable to think that my character would do this? Well, hell, I'll try it. But if it's something like, I want to fly, it's not reasonable to think that the droid's going to fly without turning into something that flies.
Right.
Same with the cleric. And I don't see the cleric turning into something that flies.
No.
One thing
It's
that
not your cleric.
Not mine.
one thing I noticed, like the last time we gamed, like when we first got started, like the first couple of sessions, I felt like I had a lot of gameplay. Like my character was doing a lot. I was, exercising that muscle.
Yeah.
And then like the last session or the last couple sessions, I felt like I was pretty quiet. Like my character was pretty quiet. And it was kind of explained to me like that sometimes happens where, the story goes to a place where, maybe the cleric, is more involved because of just where the story's at. And, so I kind of had to learn that as well. Like, just, where the story was going, my
Spotlight
shifts.
shifts.
Wasn't really,
Especially with
doing a whole lot.
The last part of the story where we're in the city, you're druid. It's not your cup of tea, and it's her town. Kind of, she's more familiar with the place that her cultist place has there. So it's like,
Right.
we're in
Not
her
a
realm
cult.
now. So
it's interesting
things
how,
shift.
like each session,
cult.
you kind of figure
It's not a
out
cult.
a little bit more about how the gameplay works, and that not every session you're going to be the star of the show or saving the day or whatever. It all kind of spreads
Dungeon
out.
World is kind of different in that you kind of expect with other systems that you're going to have a turn every
right
little bit where like I was just sitting and watching you set stuff on fire and going, no, I'm going to stand back and watch and see where this goes.
Right.
And that it's weird because you feel like you should be doing something, but it doesn't make sense in the story.
Exactly.
to
That was
do something.
that's how, like, I was reflecting on it, and I was like, man, I didn't really...
Yeah. I was telling
made
him
it
that
rain.
too.
Is that bad, And
it's
like
almost
Chris was like, no, it happens.
Yeah, it's almost like
it's just,
like writing a song. You're do I want to play all the time, like overplay? No, you just want to pick your spots where it makes sense for the song to be good.
Yeah. But as someone who's more used to, tabletop gaming or different,
Everybody gets a turn, right?
everybody gets a turn, and you have like equal amounts of like gameplay, I guess you could say. So this was this has been like a new way of looking at it. Like it's not. Like
sometimes
that,
we just get
It's
to
not
sit back and
turn-based,
listen to the story
Right.
instead of writing it.
Yeah.
And one of the things I like to do is when I'm playing the game, when I'm playing specifically Dungeon World, I'll refer to the gameplay as a movie, typically action or adventure movie. And the spotlight moves over here for now. Well, that's also true of scenes. So some scenes, like when we were talking about the alleyway, where the immolator and the druid were at that back door of the alleyway, but at that time the ranger and the cleric were not. Well, at that point, it's a whole scene. And I usually will refer to, when I'm talking about the scenes and the way the story goes, is the Lord of the Rings movie. So at this point, we're just with Frodo and Samwise. Yeah. That's who's in the scene right now. So the others aren't out of the game. And as people, we still sit around the table and talk. Like, are you really sure you want to set that thing on fire? Are you really sure you want to do that? But the characters, at that point, they're in that scene. And you don't see the others. So the people can still react, but the characters typically don't. And that's where you can get into that mindset of, should my character be doing anything? And the answer might be no, But as a person, Kelly can still talk to Chris and say whatever you want.
Right.
And that's one of the nice things about in character, out of character, do whatever we like.
Well, yeah, and it definitely, well, like Chris just said, you know, like, we're in the city, I'm a druid, and it's like, it kind of taught me something about my character. Like, oh yeah, you know, I am a druid, and she probably doesn't feel like her full self in the city, you know, so it's like, you figure yourself out, you figure your character out, you know, in those lulls or whatever.
Yeah. Then the other part for me, when we talk about where your character might not be involved, but someone else has the spotlight, one thing I've done in past campaigns, and will be doing here too, is we'll tell the story from one character's perspective for a while. Yeah. So for a while, I'll go back to one of the previous campaigns where we had what Mickey was playing Nessalus, JJ was playing, I think it may have been Strong Dawn or Calamte.
Calamte and Shadra.
And yeah, Kurt had his
Truk.
character. And what we'll do is for, I don't know, 3 or 4 recording sessions, almost everything will be something from that character's backstory and their goals. Yep. And everyone else is along for the ride.
That was kind of neat.
Yeah,
I really liked the way that you guys did that.
Focused on the characters more so. And where I draw some of that inspiration from is another, you know, sci-fi fantasy thing, but Star Trek: The Next Generation. If you ignore the first half of the first season, you go into the later episodes, almost every episode is about a character development. It's not about the story, the plot, the stuff so much anymore. And there are some episodes where characters aren't even in the episode, and others where they play one role, they fix one thing on the ship or something like that. And that's the where I get that inspiration from, is it's the entire story moves forward based on your character for this gaming session. And everyone else is along for that ride, and that helps you to build on that character, and we explore more about why your character is doing what they're doing. The motivation is key to me because that helps to define the character themselves.
Now, how do you manage if, say, there's a party of 3 and we all want to do different things?
I tell you, you can't. I just try and find a way to make it feel like you made that choice.
So basically,
short answer.
He's railroading us, and we don't even know it.
Now, what I will do, let's use that
kidding.
example right here. Let's say we've got the 3 people around the table here, and I put you in front of a cave entrance, and unanimously you decide we're not going in the cave entrance. And I'm thinking, well, I have no idea what's next. And that's just a complete conflict between what I expected you to do and what you're actually doing, which is actually the normal. But when that happens, here's in my mind, and to your point of the word railroad, I find it so that the next place you go gives you a clue that what you needed was in the cave. Right. And because that's where I want this to end up. Or I completely change it because we play in this free open world in Dungeon World, the way that I play the game. I'll make it so that maybe the cave isn't the important part anymore. You guys decided instead you wanted to go visit the old rundown shack out in the woods or something like that because you heard about it. Well, for me, whatever the important thing was in the cave, I may just move it to the shack. Because the important thing
or
is
leave
what
a note
counts.
in the shack that says,
I'm at the cave.
check it out in the cave. And we're like,
Hanging at the cave, be back in 2 hours.
But my favorite part of the collaborative storytelling I like to do in our open sandbox world is when I have an idea, and I'll give you an example here. Before we started this game, I had 4 scenarios worked out. Small town, city, ruins, and forest. And I asked you guys before we started, which sounded good to you? So in the small town, I already had it written out. This is my skeleton of what was going to happen. There was a series of overnight thefts that have been occurring. There's a nearby hobgoblin village. I guess technically you guys didn't know there was a village, but there is one. Now you know.
Spoiler alert.
In conjunction with something else from farther away, and I put in parentheses near a city. Now we know that's Iraq. And that's what was going on. So I knew that before we even started the game.
Right.
But the rest of it, when somebody says... at one point, we were talking in-game, and somebody said, it can't just be hobgoblins doing this. It's more organized than that. So then I decide, well, the people that they're working with, which I already had in my skeleton, has to be a lot smarter than hobgoblins. So I put something in my notes. So you guys helped me build that.
Right.
And then Bridget and I were talking earlier about she had this idea of getting into the upper city in Iraq by saying there was a pregnancy and someone from her clinic should be attending as a midwife or something like that. And all I knew was there needs to be a way to get into the upper city. Someone else built that way for me. I didn't have to say, because this is pre-published, your only option is to talk to the city guard, who actually has to put you in contact with a council person who will secretly let you in through the side door or something like that. Yeah. And if that's published, then I got to find a way to railroad you into it. But at that point, I don't have to railroad you because you came up with the idea yourself.
But even if you're talking about your character does one thing, her character does another thing, my character does another thing, you can also do it like, all right, you have one action, then one action. You know, you can keep it moving, like it switches scenes like you're watching a movie or a show, where you keep the action going, but it's short, very short. Like one action happens, and you move to the next person. Nobody's getting bored sitting there, kind of like twiddling their thumbs, you know. But you'd rather have everybody try to stay within some type of bounds, or some type of
where,
line.
if nothing else, the players can contribute to each other, if not the characters.
Yep.
Look at him. He's trying to make it sound like it's our decision.
I know.
Oh, I've done the same thing,
Manipulator.
exactly. I need them to kind of end here. I don't care how they get there.
Yes.
That end point needs to be met. I don't care if you're like this the whole time, up and down, curving all around. As long as you're in there, that's cool.
And no matter how many times you turn, you're still going to end there.
Yeah.
Because that's where we're going.
But it's like you said, if I had to move the location to something else, whatever. That same character is going to be hanging out or whatever group. You know.
There was a game I played in years ago where at the end of that, the end of the encounter that we were in, the GM complained that we didn't hit any of the traps in the room because we're playing, at the time it was Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition, we were playing grid-based.
Oh, yeah.
So we had the map out on the table with all the 1-inch squares, moving our figures from square to square, and at the end he was like, man, you guys didn't step on any of the traps. I wish you had stepped on any of the traps. And Chris and I have talked about this kind of thing before. If you want a trap to go off, set the trap off.
Yeah.
Don't say it didn't happen because you didn't step on square H5, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can still say you sunk my battleship even if you didn't. Make it happen because it's way more fun that way. I would rather be able to say, yes, you guys found that note in the desk drawer because you went and looked in the desk drawer rather than where I thought it would be, which was the chest at the foot of the bed.
Mm-hmm.
If I say the note's in the chest at the foot of the bed and no one ever opens it, well, guess what? My note's useless.
Yep.
I'd rather somebody say, you know what, we're going to search the drawers in the desk, and that's it. Well, okay then. I guess that's where you're finding the note because the important part is you find the note.
Yeah.
Right.
Not that you picked the right place to look for it, but that it's actually found.
Right.
And so I push for that kind of stuff. And hopefully, in my perspective at least, that helps newer players so that you don't have to pick the right thing. You just have to pick anything.
Yeah.
And I know in a way, too, that I think JJ has said this to me before. He'd rather play with a menu that he can read from than to just be faced with a list of ingredients and have to pick dishes. And that's the way I play. You have everything. What do you want to make out of it?
Right.
And sometimes he said he'd rather see a menu and say, I want, Parmesan French fries. I don't want to have to think, I want potatoes cut up. I want to put them in the fryer. And then when they're done, I want you to sprinkle them with this and that. And, and I understand that. So I'm fine helping steer. But I like to play where it's open and you say, well, I don't know what I want to do next. How about this?
Right. Well, and as a newbie, that's been one of my biggest challenges is, well, what can I do?
Now
what should I do? And I think, I don't know, coming here today, in my head, I'm thinking I want to be more, I guess, creative, more, I'm not going to ask, can I? I'm just going to say I'm going to do this.
It's better just to do it, and Joe's like, oh, you can't pull that. That's
right.
Legolas climbing up those steps when they're falling. You can't. Come on, that's crazy stuff.
It's just silly.
Right. And I talked to a friend of mine who, he has played D&D and all the role playing games and everything, and he's like, trust me, the people around you probably would rather you do something crazy and bizarre because it makes the game more interesting, it makes it more fun than to think, well, this makes sense and this is logical, so this is what I'm going to do. You're gaming in a world that is not the world we live in, so why not do something that's crazy and whimsical or whatever. So yeah, in a way it's good that you're kind of like, well, here's the ingredients versus here's the menu.
It's easier to make lasting memories from something unexpected than from the normal.
Right. Yeah.
One of the examples I like to use when we're playing even a D&D where it's more important, I like to say, pick the class you want to play. Don't worry about what everyone else is playing or even having a balanced party. Because that's one of the big things. People want a fighter, spellcaster, and some kind of utility class, essentially, to make up the party, plus a healer, of course. And I always found it's more exciting, because I remember one story from my own from a long time ago, was it was a lot more memorable to have a wizard and a fighter get through a locked door than to have a thief just walk up and pick the lock.
Right.
Because the wizard froze the lock and the fighter beat the crap out of it till it broke. And that was something that I still remember, I don't know what it is, maybe 30 years later, than the thousands of times that a thief just walked up and picked the lock because they had a good roll. Because that's normal.
Right.
When you come up with a creative way to get past a locked door, that's a memory rather than just a normal occurrence.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's, even though it's easier or more logical to do one thing, it's, it's more fun to kind of think outside the box.
You could grab a bucket of water to put the fire out, or you could just start rain.
Yeah.
Because people will remember that you made it rain.
Yeah.
Make it rain.
Make it rain.
Yeah.
What else you got, Bridget? You have other thoughts. I know you do.
Yeah.
Give it to us, girl.
Well, it's just it's still getting used to the mentality of, should I do it? Can I do it? Versus, I'm gonna do this.
Yeah.
And that's still where I am.
Yeah. Well, and also, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think for both of us, it's like, you're looking at this paper in front of you. All
There's
these
a lot of
things you can
stuff on
do.
that paper.
Like, okay, this is who I am. These are the numbers. These are the moves I can do. And then you've got Joe. All right, well, what are you going to do? And so you're like,
And I'm like, let's look down the menu. Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I can do anything, right? So it's like you're kind of overwhelmed with information and then asked to think creatively. So you're like, what?
That's kind of what I mentioned about there's no wrong thing, because you could even, we want to be tactical. I want to be the tactical guy, and somebody does something like, "Oh my God, you're going to screw us!" But that makes it more fun now.
Yeah.
Now we got to work with whatever they triggered, whatever it could be
Whatever
very
that
bad
new
for the
reality
group.
is, yeah.
That makes the story more interesting. Then we have to face whatever that kicks off, as opposed to us being right all the time. We never get hurt. That's boring. You want conflict. It's funny because people have an issue with violence, but people want conflict.
Yes.
They want adventure.
Yeah.
Conflict.
Like if you take any TV show, there's always something bad happening because you want that struggle. That's what's the heroes overcoming the struggle.
The horror movie genre would not exist.
There's tons of things. Like the whole storytelling thing is always about that struggle and conflict, and that's what's more fun. Even if you make a bad decision, whether it's character or it's cool. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
it's all good.
Your bad decision gives everyone else a chance to shine.
Yeah, that's true. Or even you, Drew, resolve it later.
Yeah. But
It's
that's
always
true,
fun.
yeah. Definitely.
One of the other things, as far as the Dungeon World system goes, the things that are on your character sheet are important to remember. But the basic moves sheet, and for that matter, the advanced moves on the flip side, those are all things that are triggered because of what you did in the world. So you're not necessarily, and I guess to me, I'll interrupt myself, it's hard to explain it this way, but the reality is your character's just going about in the world. And anytime there's a chance that what you're about to do could cause conflict or something of interest, that's when you roll. That's the very basics of the whole game. Now, the thing you're about to do, if it's specific to what your class is, it's on your class sheet. If it's not specific to your class, then it falls under the basic move or special move. So everything you want to do as you're walking through the entire world, anything you're doing that says, I might make a change to the world as is, if I do this thing, then it's going to be a move somewhere, whether it's on your character sheet, because as a druid, what you're about to do is, turn into a pigeon and crap on the mayor's head, right? Then that could make a change to the way the world is, even if it's a minor change. That's when a roll comes up, and that is you're shape-changing, and you have that move on your character sheet. If it's just, I'm walking by and I see this fire and I want to jump into the fire to save the baby. Anyone can do that. Well, that's a defy danger move now. There's a danger there and you need to defy that danger.
Right.
And that's when you're going to make a change to the world, so a roll's going to happen. That's the roll you're going to use. So it really is, you think of your characters. You're walking through the world the whole time, and I'll use the Lord of the Rings reference. When they're just trudging along with Gollum, just walking and walking, nothing happens. But when he's in the marshes and he looks down and sees a dead body, well, now all of a sudden something can happen to change the story, and that a roll's going to happen. He's defying a danger, and he happens to fail, and he falls in, right?
Right.
But then the next person comes along, they see that Frodo fell in, and they want to grab him and pull him out. So Gollum has to use his defy danger because he could drown, so now he's pulling him out of the water. And that's how it actually works.
Right.
That's how the system's designed. We're not saying, per se, that I'm just going to shapeshift. What you're saying is, I want to turn into a pigeon and drop a deuce on the mayor's head. Because
But you should make that a thing now. Every town, mayor gets dropped.
exactly. The mayor, no matter where we
Who
are.
is the mayor of Iraq?
There isn't. They have a council in Iraq. So.
You got to hit all of them now. It's a lot,
I mean, I'm gonna have to
it's a lot of pens to be
make
pooping
this
on.
happen.
Oh, and I'll let me just take a step back here, too, to make a mention to, I had said there were several different things as scenarios for when we started, and we picked small town. Well, all of the other ones are still true in this world. So Iraq was already on my list. It was just named city when we started. So there's already something else going on in Iraq that has nothing to do with what you guys have done already, which you may experience soon. There was already a thing happening in the city that's big enough for me to have written it down. So that's something that I'm sure will come up as we're playing as well. The same will be true if you approach any ruins. There's an abandoned castle not too far away. That one has something happening, and then the forest nearby also has something happening. So there's all kinds of things that the world exists outside of just the player characters.
Yep.
And hopefully it's reflected when you return to a place and it's different from the last time you were there.
Right.
So the next time you go to Valshand, hopefully all the stuff that was stolen is back on people's, tables, and the lamps are hanging up in the street and all that again, instead of still sitting in the sheriff's office where you left them. Right. The world evolves and changes while you go. And hopefully that helps with new players, in that it's like the real world where things are still happening when you're not around. Familiarity, I guess, with how the world works, even though it's not quite the same. As you pointed out earlier, it's not the world we live in, so why do we have to act like the world we live in?
Right.
We'll still obey some of the fantasy rules of physics, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Chemistry, though,
Yeah. A lot of things could be bent really far.
yeah, we have lots of changes there. So what I'd like to hear, if you have any more thoughts, is in the early episodes, what were the things that you felt like you struggled with the most? I say early. Everything right up until now. What were things that you think is situations where you think you struggled with your character that we might be able to help you? Because the next situation that comes up, what we say might help.
It was just interesting being a character who had been secluded from other people, and now trying to figure out how I'm going to fit in and work with these other people. Because as the character itself, she didn't have any network outside of her order.
Her order.
Which is not a cult.
Not
Totally
a
a
cult.
cult.
Not a cult order.
Cult.
So yeah, just literally being in a box and opening the box and going, okay, now what?
Yeah, I always thought it was pretty impressive that your character has quite the backstory.
Yeah, it seems like she really does. And I'm tempted to write it all out.
Yeah.
Now, let me tell you, I really like when a player says, yeah, I think my character really does have backstory. Because that's there's a spark hit. Even though you haven't written it, there's something there, and it makes you more invested in the character. I like to hear that.
Yeah.
Well, it's things you could base decisions that the character makes off that,
Yeah.
they're this person because of that backstory, so they do this.
Now, I was going to say one of the moments that I know captured everyone else's interest too, and listening back to it was awesome when you decided that your guidance was going to be that you cut yourself and the blood went in the direction you should go.
That was awesome.
Because, other people probably figured by now that you cut yourself, but that it was actually useful.
But I was
Right?
trying to figure
Bonus.
out how to stay true to what I imagined the character would do
Yeah.
without dismissing things that would be logical. Like you had said, is this a logical thing to do? No, it's not really illogical, but is it true to what the character would, how their motivation and their line of thinking.
It really makes the line, if it bleeds, it leads, come true.
That's an interesting one.
That should be the move. If it bleeds, it leads.
If it bleeds,
Ooh,
it bleeds.
yeah.
That puts the
good.
cleric in a whole new light, though, which Bridget has put the cleric in our party in a whole new light.
Yeah, and I like that. I guess I took a cleric to a different place where I wouldn't have imagined a cleric.
But that makes it really
Yeah.
cool because people have this like, oh, they're this healer dude, happy healer guy. Do they have to be?
Nope.
Yeah, he could heal.
No, I'm
they
kinda
could heal
dark.
people.
Yeah.
But that's true though. Of like clerics, everybody's got that. You know,
Yeah.
it's they work their magic out in a different way. You know,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the
It makes
idea
it makes
the
it for a more
idea
interesting character.
of suffering being important, right? Because there is no healing without some form of suffering, and so it kind of makes sense that you would thrive off of suffering so that you could heal it. Yeah. It's creepy, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, I didn't want her to be creepy. I wanted it to
Too
be.
late.
Well, I
cult
still
thing
don't
kinda
think
just
it's
threw that
creepy
off.
because,
Yeah.
well, I guess as the character doesn't think that's creepy. They think it's completely normal and
Right.
and honorable, even.
That's exactly how it should be. Because like even the bad guys, they're the hero of their stories.
Yeah.
They're not
Right.
bad guys, so it totally makes
Like,
sense.
no, she's totally convinced that she's doing
Yeah, the right thing.
her goddess's work. Like she's doing great, even though it's creeping everybody else out. Except when it worked, and
Yeah,
you're
that
like,
was- that
"Hey,
was-
that's cool."
That's awesome.
Awesome. That is the coolest.
Could you cut
creepy
yourself
thing.
again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kelly, what's been driving your character?
I don't know.
You're not sure yet?
And that's why I mentioned Bridget. Like, I think it's pretty impressive that even, like, the first couple sessions, like, she had a great background story and, you know, where her character came from. And I mean, she's been playing off of that, you know, pretty much the whole...
And I literally had no preconception of what it
Yeah.
was going to be before we sat down.
So that's, like, she's my polar opposite because I'm, like, just kind of rolling with
You're
it as
winging
it goes.
Yeah.
And I don't really
Whichever
know
way the
where
wind
Trillium
blows.
came from. And I mean, I kind of do, but not a detailed story.
And I think it really does kind of build as you go.
Yeah.
And you start
Yeah.
thinking, would I do A or B? Well, given this history or given this frame of reference, what not just what's more logical, but what would be more of their nature to do.
Right.
And as you do that, then you're like, okay, you don't just have A and B for history, you have C, D, and E.
Right.
That now you can go back and do other different things.
Right. And I think, like, the first couple sessions, we were still, you know, in my territory. Like, we were in the forest.
Yeah.
We were just, you know, we were just outside the small town. And now we're in the city. We're in Harak. And I'm kind of like, what am I doing here? Because in the forest, it was more like, this is my space. This is my domain. I want these things out. And so I've kind of decided to go along this little adventure. And yeah, I don't know.
Something
I don't know why I'm still around.
But there are things that you've established that you could take forward in some ways. Is one example of you knew there was this plant that kept hobgoblins away, or at least they didn't like it, and you could use that. Well, to me, that means there's extra things that your druid knows about plant life that maybe a normal druid may or may not. So if something's happening in the city and you think there's a certain herb or plant or something that could help with that, you could just say, I know it's not growing here, but somebody here has to sell that. We're going to look for XYZ plant. And because you know that this helps in this situation.
Right.
Now the trick is in the city, how do you find it? Where's the herbalist? What shop? Is it a florist because it's a flower, right?
Right.
And that could be something you take forward because you spoke that at the time it was with complete authority. There's this plant that grows in this certain spot, and I know where it is, and we
Yeah,
can
I
plant
thought that
it
was
around
neat
the
that you came
town.
up with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that means something
I think, like,
from
me,
the character.
like, me personally, that's...
Yeah.
I'm interested in the outdoors and nature and, you know, so as, again, like, as a person in real life and as, like, the Trillium character being in this city, I'm out of my element.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess this next couple of sessions I'll have to explore
one thing that
that.
people in cities like is taking nature and putting it in their homes, in their shops.
This
So
is
you
true.
definitely can find just about anything you could find in nature
And maybe
in the city.
maybe the infirmary needs some supplies, some herbal supplies.
That's true.
You mean the
The
cult?
apothecary.
Like what?
The cult?
No,
Or the
the
infirmary?
infirmary.
Isn't it the same thing?
No.
Okay.
The clinic.
The clinic.
I've decided to call it the infirmary because I don't think clinic is
Yeah.
very old timey.
Yeah.
Sounds
Clinic
good enough.
sounds very sterile.
It
and
sounds sterile and modern.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was racking my brain all morning. Like I got to come up with some different name for it because I don't like it being called clinic.
Yeah.
That's a good point. We still need a name for the whole place, but yeah. And
Yeah.
that's another thing. As new players, when I'm asking you to come up with names, I know it puts you right on the spot.
Yeah,
But it's
that's-
okay to come up
that
with
hurts.
one later.
It's
Yes.
like brain froze.
It's also fine to come up with, as Bridget has done, come up with the words that are right on the sheet. At the top of the character sheet,
Oh, right, yeah.
there are all these names that you can
Oh,
use
yeah.
for your character. Well, you can use those for anything.
Yeah, that's been a great resource. I think I've named everything that I've named off of that sheet.
And one of the things
Yeah.
I like to do as well is if you're faced with a list of names and you're deciding you don't like any of them, take the first syllable from one, the second syllable from another, the
Yep.
third syllable from another, kind of start mashing them together. It allows you to start thinking of weird names, weird concoctions of letters. And then we can just use them. Heck, you can come up with one that's all vowels or all consonants, and we can find a stupid way to say it. And now all of a sudden, that's a name of something. It's a town. It's a
Right.
it's a shop. It's whatever. And it's perfectly fine because that's the way the real world works for us too. You go look at a place and it's spelled completely different from it the way it's said.
Oh, yeah.
Like Worcester,
Like Chicopee.
Chicopee. There are so many places that are spelled oddly or have names that have nothing to do with the area they're in. They just were named that way 200 years ago, something like that.
Right.
So we can do any of that stuff now. It is putting you on the spot, yes, but to be frank, it's either me or you on the spot, and I might as well try you. And then if you don't have something, I'll do it.
Yeah.
I was pretty impressed with Kurt coming up with Harak right on the spot like that.
Not knowing.
And then
we
playing
probably
like
heard, but no.
Yeah, I
Come on.
just
didn't
I
mean
loved
for it
his
to-
back pedal. Oh no, what did I say?
I figured it was already on his mind.
So did
Take it
I.
seriously.
Like I totally thought that was a classic Kurt
yeah.
name, and then he's like, no,
Yeah.
no, we can change it.
I figured he was already looking up boobs on his laptop.
It could have been.
He might have been.
So the city is named Harak, and the city next door is named German Dungeon Porn. No, I wasn't thinking that at all.
Like Kurt, you were on the wrong tab of your browser. Change it.
And another thing I like to do is NPCs get one name. We almost always have a single name NPC, no first name, no last name, just one name because it's so much easier to remember them for me, and that's one less word that I have to remember. Right. And when I put my notes down, it's like that. I'll pretty much never refer to your characters with a last name if you have it. If you bring that up, let's say you have a character with a first and last name, and the last name is important because it has family history.
Right.
There's something there, then that's fine. Let's do it because we'll put that into the story. That's important. But otherwise, it's one name. Like the sheriff, I gave him two names because I said his name was Philip first, but then it was Philip what? And it was Philip Almijoles. Right?
Yeah, and then hopefully we left that last name in the dust somewhere.
No, I have it written.
Yeah. Plus, it just made
Typed,
recorded
yeah.
just now. So.
And again.
Now it's again.
And that part is fun to me, at least, because it becomes a memorable character because of a stupid name that we
Of
giggle
course.
at because
Yeah.
we're all nice and mature at
Yeah.
our tables. But as things go up for discussion, as we're talking around the table, I start making notes as well. So there was somebody had mentioned, I don't know who it was, I didn't write down who said it, but another town nearby was Toad Falls. And somebody said that was just the name of a town nearby. So that's there now. That exists. So at some point, we'll either visit or there will be news about Toad Falls. That's the kind of thing that I keep the notes on. That's why I keep this iPad in front of me so I can type up notes. But anybody who keeps notes, those are the people typically like Chris and Kurt that end up doing recaps of sessions.
Yeah.
So if you never want to do a recap, don't keep notes.
Yeah.
Right.
I just make maps.
You make the map. Bridget,
pretty nice
that's
map,
another
actually.
good thing for the table. That's something I
I'm
encourage
gonna
anybody
have to
do.
redo that. 'cause
Very encouraged that a new player just did it because nobody had to be asked.
Yeah.
When
I'm
we
a
started
visual
talking-
person in an audio podcast. It's like, I need some
It helps
pictures.
tell the story,
Yeah.
though.
Yeah.
It does, because now at least we have consistency when we refer back to certain things. When we say Harak looks like this, right?
As he holds
yeah.
out
We
two.
know, two
Like
hands
open
far
hands.
apart from each other.
Huge tracts of land.
Huge tracts of land. But we now have Bridget's paper, which this is the interesting part. From what I was saying earlier, that is not how I had pictured it, but that is now how it is. It's that simple because everyone has seen it. I don't need to try and shoehorn my idea onto the table because we have an idea that everyone else has seen. This is, for me, the way to do it. It's not a pre-published adventure, so I didn't have to put out a map of a city. We now have an overview of a city, which looks like a donut with an amoeba in the middle. That'd be a paramecium amoeba.
That's an amoeba.
It's an amoeba. It's a multi-celled amoeba.
It's pretty
But
big.
that helps us because now we have that around the table. And again, anybody doing that is great. It's awesome that somebody new to the table at the first opportunity drew out a map and showed it to everybody. This is how I think it looks. Definitely worth doing. Appreciate it. Well, golf clap
Yeah.
for you.
Aww.
Well done. And you already drew a legend for it.
I
Well,
know,
yeah,
that's
I
awesome,
mean-
too.
Yeah.
That's just me. That's if I can't, I need a box. I need a picture. I need a box. I need to have things organized and logical. And if this is the only way I can make things logical in the illogical game,
Yeah.
then
Cool.
that's what I'm gonna do. I'll be the cartographer.
So now we're going to come up towards the end of this Sidebar podcast where we are communicating with our players at the table as well as specifically with our new players, seeing what they thought, things that we could do differently. What parting thoughts might y'all have?
I do think it's going to be more fun and more interesting and more memorable the longer we go, the further we get into it.
That's what she said.
Yep.
Nobody could see you flipping me.
No,
off.
that's fine. At least you knew.
It was just for you.
It's
It
just
was.
for you.
Especially.
And now you've shared it with the
I
world.
shared it with everybody.
Yeah, I think I agree with Bridget. It's just a matter of like working the muscle, getting,
Thinking differently.
Yeah.
And speaking of having the muscle memory for it, Chris, what do you think?
For me, I mean, I always want to know what the new people think. Like, do you have I guess like a wish list of either for the game or the characters or the world we're building, like something you'd like to see,
Or something you'd like to have me do more of. Like one of the things
Right.
that I think came up earlier was I can lead more rather than if you're in a spot where you're like, I don't know what to do. I can just say, well, there's a guy walking by in the street and he mentioned something about the were-rats in the sewer. Like, well, poof, now there's something to do.
Yeah.
And I think with us being newer, we might need that more now to start, and then maybe not so much once we get
Yeah.
really into an action scene or whatever.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's the lulls in between the action scenes where we're kind of like, do we go left? Do we go right? Do
Yeah.
we climb a wall? Do we
Yeah.
Yes.
stand here and stare at each other?
Yeah,
All
so
those
it
things.
We
would
don't
definitely,
know what to
like
do.
little prompts,
Yeah.
maybe here and there.
Like hint, hint.
nudge, nudge, say no more.
Like
Yeah,
the little
one-
guy,
one
little
shot,
character
quick.
walking around has a little star over his head, and we
Yeah.
need to talk to him.
Like we did with the starter set. We
Yes.
turned it into kind of the MMO.
The quest log.
Yeah, this guy has an orange question mark over his head.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
means he has something for you. But and I have no problem doing something like that. As long as when we learn the thing, you guys remember you have to take some initiative on how to approach it. What are the next steps?
Yeah.
But I have no problem with prompting for quests and stuff. That just means I have to make some more stuff up rather than waiting for you guys to do it.
And I think that's also just like a beginner's
Yeah.
issue.
It's probably
And,
just us.
it'll probably be something that as we continue and get, used to getting in the mindset, it'll, dissolve.
Yeah,
So-
because in reality, you both have done what I would just want you to do more often, and that's like I was saying to Kelly earlier. You went and said, "There's this plant that we need." Bridget mentioned how her cult runs a clinic, like not a cult, runs a clinic. Well, poof,
Infirmary.
those things are now part of our world. They're in our story, and you did it possibly without thinking or with thinking, but not knowing the consequences or ramifications that are all good. Those are all good results.
Ultimately, it boils down to just like settling into your character, no matter where you are, no matter who you're with, and getting to that place is a challenge, like settling into your character and kind of knowing who your character is. For me, it's been a process, and
It definitely has.
yeah, and like just playing more.
Figuring out the motivations.
Yeah,
or, like, why am I doing this? What would I want to do?
Yeah,
Instead of what does Bridget want to do?
right.
This is where creating that backstory kind of will force
Yeah.
that motivation a little bit.
Right.
too.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good thought to end the Sidebar podcast on. That's a really good one. So we can all wrap this up and we can say
Bye.
everyone.
Adios.
The preceding podcast was brought to you by One Joe Young. You can find us online at adventuresfromtheshed.com.